Locomotion and movement. Movement is one of the significant features of the living beings. Animals and plants exhibit a wide range of movements. Streaming of protoplasm in the unicellular organism, like amoeba, is a simple form of movement. Movement of cilia, flagella, tentacles are shown by many organisms. Human being can move limbs, jaws, eyelids, tongue, etc. Some of the movement result in change of place or location. Such voluntary movement are called locomotion. Walking, running, climbing, flying, swimming are all some forms of locomotory movements. Locomotory structures need not to be different from those affecting the other type of movement. For example, paramecium. Cilia helps in movement of the food through cytopharynx and in locomotion as well. Hydra can use its tentacles for capturing the prey and also use them for locomotion. We use limbs for changes in our body postures and locomotion as well. The above observations suggest that movements and locomotion cannot be studied separately. The two may be linked by stating that all locomotion are movement, but all movement are not locomotions. Method of locomotion performed by animals vary with their habitats and the demand of the situation. However, locomotion is generally for the search of food, shelter, mate, suitable breeding grounds, favorable climatic condition, or to escape from enemies slash predators. Types of movement. Cell of the human body exhibit three main types of movement, namely amoeboid, ciliary, muscular. Some specialized cells in our body, like macrophages and leukocytes in the blood, exhibit amoeboid movement. It is affected by pseudopodia formed by the streaming of the protoplasm as in amoeba. Cytoskeleton elements like microfilament are also involved in the amoeboid movement. Ciliary movement occurs in most of our internal tubular organ which are lined by ciliated epithelium. The coordinated movement of the cilia in the trachea helps us in removing the dust particles and some of the foreign substances inhaled along with the atmospheric air. Passage of the ova through the female reproductive tract is also facilitated by the ciliary movement. The movement of our limbs, jaws, tongues, etc. require a muscular movement. The contractile property of the muscles are effectively used for the locomotion and the other movement by the human beings and majority of the multicellular organisms. Locomotion requires a perfect coordinated activity of muscular, skeletal, and the neural systems. In this chapter, you will learn about the types of muscles, their structure, mechanism of their contraction, and the important aspect of the skeleton system. Muscles. You have studied in chapter 8 that the cilia and flagella are the outgrowth of the cell membrane. Flagellar movement help in swimming of the spermatozoa, maintenance of water current in the canal system of the sponges, and in locomotion of the protozoans like euglena. Muscles is an specialized tissue of the mesodermal origin. About 40 to 50% of the body weight of the human adult is contributed by the muscle. They have special properties like excitability, contractibility, extensibility, and the elasticity. Muscles have been classified using a different criteria, namely the location, appearance, nature, and the regulation of their activities. Based on their location, three types of muscles are identified: skeletal, visceral, cardiac. Skeletal muscles are closely associated with the skeletal components of the body. They have a stripped appearance under the microscope and hence are called striated muscle. As their activities are under the voluntary control of the nervous system, they are known as voluntary muscle and they are primarily involved in the locomotory actions and changes of the body postures. Visceral muscles are located in the inner walls of hollow visceral organ of the body like the alimentary canal, the reproductive tract, etc. They do not exhibit any striations or and are smooth in appearance. Hence, they are called the smooth muscles (non-striated muscles). Their activities are not under the voluntary control of the nervous system and are therefore known as involuntary muscle. They assist, for example, in the transport of the food through the digestive tract and the gametes through the genetic tract. As the name suggests, cardiac muscle are the muscles of the heart. Many cardiac muscle cells assemble in a branching pattern to form a cardiac muscle. Based on the appearance, cardiac muscle are striated, they are involuntary in nature, and as the nervous system does not control their activities directly. Let us examine a skeletal muscle in detail to understand the structure and the mechanism of the contraction. Each organized skeletal muscle in our body is made up of number of muscle bundles or fascicles held together by a common collagenous connective tissue layer called fascia. Each muscle bundle contains a number of muscle fibers, and each muscle fiber is lined by a plasma membrane called sarcolemma, enclosing the sarcoplasm. Muscle fiber is a syncytium, as sarcoplasm contains many nuclei. The endoplasmic reticulum, that is the sarcoplasmic reticulum of the muscle fiber, is the storehouse of calcium ions. A characteristic feature of the muscle fiber is the presence of large number of parallelly arranged filamentous in the sarcoplasm called as myofilaments or the myofibrils. Each myofibril has an alternate dark and light bands on it. A detailed study of the myofibril established that are striated appearance due to the distribution pattern of the two important proteins, actin and myosin. The light band contains the actin called I band, isotropic band, whereas the dark band is an anisotropic band and contain myosin. Both the proteins are arranged as a rod-like structure parallel to each other and also to the longitudinal axis of the myofibril. Actin filament are thinner as compared to the myosin filament, hence are commonly called thin and thick filaments respectively. In the center of each I band is an elastic fiber called Z line, which bisect it. The thin filaments are firmly attached to the Z line. The thick filament in the A band are also held together in the middle of the band by the thin fibrous membrane called M line. The A and the I are arranged alternatively throughout the length of the myofibril. The portion of the myofibril between the two successive Z lines are considered as a functional unit of contraction and is called the sarcomere. In the resting state, edges of the thin filament on each side of the thick filament are partially overlap. Edges of the thin filaments on either side of the thick filament are partially overlap the free ends of the thick filaments leaving the central part of the thick filament. The central part of the thick filament not overlapped by the thin filament is called the H zone. Structure of contractile protein. Each actin thin filament is made of two F filamentous actins helically wound to each other. Each F actin is a polymer of monomeric G globular actins. The filaments of another protein, tropomyosin, also runs close to the F actin throughout its length. The complex protein troponin is distributed at the regular interval on the tropomyosin. In the resting state, the subunit of the troponin masks the active binding site for the myosin on the actin filaments. Each myosin filament is also a polymerized protein. Many monomeric protein called the meromyosin constitute one thick filament. Each meromyosin has two important parts, the globular head and the short arm and a tail, the former being called heavy meromyosin HMM and the later the light meromyosin LMM. The HMM component, that is the head and the short arm, projects outward at the regular distances and distance and angle from each other from the surface of the polymerized myosin filament and is known as cross arm. The globular head is an active ATPase enzyme and has a binding site for ATP and active site for actin. Mechanism of the muscle contraction. Mechanism of the muscle contraction is best explained by the sliding filament theory, which states that the contraction of the muscle fiber take place by the sliding of the thin filament over the thick filament. Muscle contraction is initiated by a signal sent to the central nervous system via the motor neuron. The motor neuron, along with the muscle fiber connected to the constitute a motor unit. The junction between the motor neuron and the sarcolemma of the muscle fiber is called the neuromuscular junction or the motor end plate. The neural signal reaching the junction release a neurotransmitter acetylcholine which generates an action potential in the sarcolemma. The spreads through the muscle fiber and cause the release of calcium ions into the sarcoplasm. Increase in the calcium level leads to the binding of calcium with the subunit of the troponin on the actin filament and thereby remove the masking active site for myosin. Utilizing the energy of ATP hydrolysis, the myosin heads now bind to the exposed active site of the actin to form a cross bridge. This pulls the attached actin filament toward the center of the A band, and the Z line attached to the actin are also pulled inwards, thereby causing a shortening of the sarcomere. That is contraction. It is clear from the above steps that during the shortening of the muscle, that is the contraction, the I band get reduced, whereas the A band retain its length. The myosin releasing the ADP and P goes back to its relaxed state. A new ATP binds and the cross bridge is broken. The ATP again hydrolyzed by the myosin head and the cycle of cross bridge formation and the breakage is repeated, causing the further sliding. The process continues till the calcium plus ions are pumped back to the sarcoplasmic cisternae, resulting in the masking of the actin filament again. This caused the return of Z line back to the original position, that is the relaxation. The reaction time of the fiber the action time of the fibers can vary in different muscles. Repeated activation of the muscle can lead to accumulation of lactic acid and due to the anaerobic breakdown of the glycogen in them, causing the fatigue. Muscle contain red colored oxygen storing pigment called myoglobin. Myoglobin content is high in some of the muscles, which gives a reddish appearance. Some such muscles are called the red fibers. The muscles also contain plenty of mitochondria, which can be utilize the large amount of oxygen stored in them for ATP production. These muscles therefore can also call the aerobic muscles. On the other hand, some of the muscle possesses very less quantity of myoglobin and therefore appear pale or whitish. These are the white fibers, and the number of mitochondria are also few in them. But the amount of sarcoplasmic reticulum is high. They depend on the anaerobic process of energy. Skeleton system. Skeletal system. Skeletal system consists of a framework of bones and a few cartilages. Their system has a significant role in the movement shown by the body. Imagine chewing food without the jaw bones or walking around without the limb bones. Bones and cartilage are specialized connective tissue. The former has a very hard matrix due to the calcium salts in it, and the latter has slightly pliable matrix due to the chondroitin salts. In human beings, the system is made up of 206 bones and a few cartilages. It is grouped into the two principal divisions, the axial and the appendicular skeleton. Axial skeleton comprises of the 80 bones distributed along the main axis of the body. The skull, vertebral column, sternum, ribs constitute axial skeleton, and the skull is composed of the two sets of bone, cranial and the facial. The total 22 bones. Cranial bones are 8 in number. The form hard protective outer covering cranium for the brain. The facial region is made up of 14 skeletal elements which form the front part of the skull. A single U-shaped bone called hyoid bone is present in the base of the buccal cavity and is also included in the skull. Each middle ear, uh, each middle ear contains three tiny bones, malleus, incus, stapes, collectively called the ear ossicles. The skull region articulates with the superior region of the vertebral column with the help of two occipital condyles dicondylic skull. Our vertebral column is formed of 26 serially arranged units called vertebrae, and is dorsally placed. It extends from the base of the skull and constitutes the main framework of the trunk. Each vertebra has a central hollow portion through which a spinal cord passes. First vertebra is the atlas and it articulates with the occipital condyles. The vertebral column is differentiated into the cervical bracket in bracket 7, thoracic in bracket 12, lumbar in bracket 5, and sarcal 1 fused and the coccygeal 1 fused. Regions starting from the skull, the number of the cervical vertebrae are 7 in almost all mammals, including human beings. The vertebral column protects the spinal cord, supports the head, and serves as the point of attachment for the ribs and the musculature of the back. Sternum is a flat bone on the ventral midline of the thorax. There are 12 pair of ribs. Each rib is a thin flat bone connected dorsally to the vertebral column and ventrally to the sternum. It has two articulation surfaces on its dorsal end and hence is called a bicephalic. First 7 pairs of ribs are the true ribs. Dorsally they are attached to the thoracic vertebrae and ventrally connected to the sternum with the help of hyaline cartilage. The 8th, 9th, 10th pair of ribs do not articulate directly with the sternum but joins the 7th rib, which with the help of a hyaline cartilage. These are called the vertebrocondyle bracket false ribs. Last two pairs, 11th and 12th rib, are not connected ventrally and are thereby called floating ribs. Thoracic vertebra, ribs and sternum together form the rib cage. The bones of the limbs along with their girdles constitute the appendicular skeleton. Each limb is made up of 30 bones, whether it is leg, whether it is hand, anything. The bones of hand, bracket, forelimbs are humerus, radius, and ulna, carpals, wrist bone, which is 8 in number. Metacarpals, bracket, palm bones, which is 5 in number, and the phalanges, which is your digits, finger, which is 14 in numbers. Femur, the thigh bone, is the longest bone. Tibia and the fibula and tarsals, bracket, ankle bones, which is 7 in number. Metatarsals are 5 in number and the phalanges are 14 in number. Are the bones of the legs, bracket, hind limb. A cup-shaped bone called the patella cover the knee ventrally called kneecap. Pectoral and pelvic girdle bones help in the articulation of the upper and the lower limbs respectively with the axial skeleton. Each girdle is formed of two halves. Each half of pectoral girdle consists of clavicle and a scapula. Scapula is a large triangular flat bone situated dorsal part of the thorax between the second and the 7th rib. The dorsal flat triangular body of scapula has a slightly elevated ridge called spine, which projects as flat expanded process called acromion. The clavicle articulate with this. Below the acromion is a depression called glenoid cavity, which articulate with the head of the humerus to form shoulder joint. Each clavicle is a long cylinder bone with the two curvatures. This bone is commonly called the collarbone. pelvic girdle consists of the two coxal bones. Each coxal bone is formed of the fusion of the three bones, ilium, ischium, pubis. At the point of the fusion, the bone cavity called acetabulum to which the thigh bone articulates, and the two halves of the pelvic girdle meet ventrally to form the pubic symphysis, containing the fibrous cartilage. Now let's talk about joints. Joints are the essential for all types of movements involving the bony part of the body. Locomotory movement are no exception to this. Joints are the points of contact between the bones or between bones and the cartilages. Force generated by the muscle is used to carry out the movement throughout the joint, where the joint acts as a fulcrum, which means point on which something is joint. The mobility at these joints vary depending upon the different factors. Joints have been classified into three major structural forms, namely the fibrous, cartilaginous, synovial. Fibrous joints do not allow any movement. This type of joint are shown by the flat skull bones and which fuse end to end with the help of the dense fibrous connective tissue in the form of sutures to form the cranium. The cartilaginous joints, the bones involved are joined with the help of cartilages. The joint between the adjacent vertebrae in the vertebral column is the pattern and it permits limited movement. Synovial joints are characterized by the presence of a fluid-filled synovial cavity between the articulating surfaces of the two bones. Such an arrangement allows the considerable movement. These joints help in locomotion and many other movement. Ball and socket joint between the humerus and the pectoral girdle. The hinge joint, which is a knee joint. Pivot joint between the atlas and the axis. Gliding joint between the carpals. And the saddle joint between the carpals and the metacarpals of the thumb are some examples. Disorder of the muscular and the skeletal system. Myasthenia gravis is an autoimmune disorder affecting neuromuscular junction leading to fatigue, weakening, and paralysis of the skeletal muscle. Muscular dystrophy is a progressive degeneration of the skeletal muscle, mostly due to the genetic disorder. Tyranny is a rapid spasm while contraction in the muscle due to the low calcium in the body fluid. Arthritis is the inflammation of the joints. Osteoporosis is a related disorder characterized by the decreased bone mass and increased chances of fractures. Decreased level of estrogen in the estrogen is the common cause. Gout, inflammation of joints due to the accumulation of the uric acid crystal. Thank you.